Hey everybody, welcome back to One Seed, One World. So today I'm out here on a very hazy day. We are getting the smoke from the wildfires in Quebec that has come down here to the mid-Atlantic, which is unfortunate. It's actually a little bit better than it was this morning. Just to give you a quick idea, before we get into this, I just wanted to show you the mountain that I can see from my house, from my backyard. This is what it looks like on a normal day. And this is what it looks like today. So you can see that we are definitely being affected by the smoke haze here. The air quality, we're at an orange alert, although tomorrow it's supposed to drop to a yellow, so I guess it'll get a little bit better by tomorrow. It's actually looking a little bit better now than it was early this morning, so I decided to come out here and get some videoing done. Anyway, we'll be talking about beets today, specifically skinny beets, and what might cause you to have skinny beets. And we'll go over kind of the three top things along with a couple other things that may affect them if you're running into this. So let's take a look at my beets here. So look at all this beautiful foliage that I've got going on, these beautiful green leaves. Looks really great, right? That we're gonna have these big, beautiful beets. However, beautiful foliage does not always mean that you're gonna have big, wonderful, huge beets. Example number one. Not much of a beet. Can't do a whole lot with that. It's like a one bite. But we do have good greens, and I love eating beet greens. So there's still some plus in there. Now I know many of you looking at this are probably, your first thing is going to say, well, the reason you got skinny beets is because they're all planted too close together. They can't grow if they're all jammed in there if you didn't thin them out, right? All right, so let's go into that. Number one, reasons why you can have skinny beets. They don't have enough room to grow. They weren't thinned out. Yes, that can happen. However, if you look at some of these other big gardening channels like Charles Dowding, M.I. Gardner, some of these other ones, they always plant their beets in groups. A lot of times they'll start them indoors in like groups of 2, 3, 4, and then transplant the whole little group together outside. And that's what I did this year. I did them like in 2s and 3s, planted them outside, and I have planted them close together before. Now, that being said, it doesn't always work. I've also read different articles and blogs by different people who have done the same thing, and some years they get really good beets and other years they don't. So what may be some of the other factors that, if you have planted your beets close together like I have here, why sometimes does it work and other times not? So just to finalize that, one, yes, planting beets too close together can cause you to get skinny beets. However, that one's got a little bit of a skinny top, but it's a pretty good sized thick beet there, right? I mean, it's not massive or anything, but it's a very decent beet going on that I can get some out of. So what may cause this? Item number 2, reasons why your beets may be skinny. Whether you thin them out, because it also happens when you thin them out, or if you plant them in groups. In my case here with these particular beets, they had a lot of stress when they were first getting started. When your plant is stressed, especially the leaves, it's going to try to mitigate that, and it will put off more foliage. In my case, I had mice in my basement that were getting into my little mini greenhouses down there and eating all my beet leaves. And so when I brought them outside to transplant them, they had chunks missing off of almost all the leaves and were looking pretty rough. They made a very nice recovery out here, but that extreme stress early on, the leaves, or the plant, is going to put off more leaves because they need those leaves to get the photosynthesis so they can start developing their roots and everything. Sometimes if they're too overstressed, they're going to put way more energy into making great leaves than they are into the actual beetroot itself. And so in that case, you're going to end up with way more leaves than you are beet, which I have going on here with some of these, actually a large portion of these. So that's reason number 2. High stress to the plant while it's developing can cause skinny beets. Number 3, another thing that can cause skinny beets can be too much nitrogen in your soil. Nitrogen is great for leafy greens, hence leafy greens. But things like lettuce and Swiss chard and things that you want big leaves on, you want, a good amount of nitrogen in your soil. But if you've got too much nitrogen, a lot of your root crops and other crops as well will end up putting off way more foliage than they will producing the actual fruit itself. So if you have a case where everything in your garden bed, whether it's a raised bed or in the ground, is just really green, beautiful, fluffy plants, but you're getting, like, say, hardly any good sized beets, or maybe you're not really getting any tomatoes or peppers or whatever the case may be, you might have too much nitrogen. Now, how can you tell if you have too much nitrogen? The only way to tell for sure is by doing a soil test. And I'm going to be doing a video coming up on a home soil test that you can do. You can purchase various different levels of them for different price points on Amazon and other places, and test your soil to see kind of like what your pH balance is, and depending on the test that you get, they can tell you different things about your soil. In many places, your local ag department will do soil tests for a fee. You can take it into them, they'll test the soil, and those fees will probably vary by state to state or county to county even. But you could get your soil tested. You could also just do some random tests yourself without all the kits. For example, I know that this bed is not overdone in nitrogen because I have other things, like this other variety of beet here. I'm probably pulling it a little early. This could get bigger. But this is right next door to the same beets. And you see it's perfectly round, no skinny. It's filling out. And I think this might be, what do they call it? Chogia? I don't know how to pronounce it. I think that's maybe what this is. They had like the red and white stripes inside. I think I planted some of those. But because this beet is filling in as a normal beet should, and it's in the bed right next door, I know I don't have too much nitrogen. So you can do those kind of tests too. Plant similar things next to each other and see, how they are affected by your soil. Is one doing really well and another one not? Then it's not your soil, it's something else going on. All right, so those are the 3 main things. Maybe planting too close, high stress, and then too much nitrogen. But there's other things that can make your beets skinny as well. Things like the environment, temperatures. If you have very high heats, beets are more of a cooler weather crop. They do better in spring and in fall. So if you are growing, maybe you had an unexpected heat wave in the spring where it's like 95 degrees in May, or maybe you're trying to grow them in the middle of the summer where it's super hot, you might end up with a lot more foliage instead of the actual beetroot itself. And again, that goes back to the stress. The plant is stressed. It's trying to save itself, so it's putting more energy into areas that it can control. And over time, maybe besides the foliage, it would also go to seed and produce more seeds so it could perpetuate itself to save itself from the bad environment that it's in. So it's another stress thing with the skinny beets. But it's not always rodents. Sometimes it's high heats. Sometimes it's too much water, too little water, where they can't absorb enough nutrients. So they're trying to put off the foliage, get to a seeding point where they can reseed themselves and perpetuate themselves. Heavy insects, like if you've got a lot of insect damage going on, that can also give you skinny beets. So there's other things too, but it all goes back to that stress point thing that we talked about in number 2. If a plant is stressed, it's gonna do what it can to save its species, basically. And so that isn't going to be putting its energy into developing a nice beetroot for you. So that is basically the skinny root problem and some things that you can do to mitigate that problem or why you might be running into it. But as I said, you know, beets aren't always just about the beet roots. So if you end up with a bunch of skinny beets, well, this is not a skinny beet, but if you end up with, you know, a bunch of little sad looking beets like this one here, you're still got the greens, and the stalks are so tasty. These are actually my favorite green. That and Swiss chard, I think, are tied for my favorite, but I love myself some beet greens. And you'll even see in some farmers markets where some people may even just be selling beet greens instead of the root. Or sometimes they'll sell both, but sometimes you can buy bags of beet greens and they're really good. So, you know, it's not always a loss. You can eat all parts of this plant. So, whatever's going on in your neck of the woods, I hope it's working out fantastic for you and that you're getting yourself some good beets this year, whether they are the standard old red beets, maybe you're trying the golden variety. I've got some of those going on in here, and there's also a white variety that I just found out about, so I might have to try that one at some point in the future. But I hope that yours are growing well, and I appreciate that you're here hanging out with me again today. We will see you again soon. Namaste.